HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Great State of West Florida, a novel. By Kent Wascom, read by Justin Price. Belief has nothing to do with true or false. Never has, never will. Harry Crews. The Battle of Tiger Cove. Now she rides the highways in the spurs, making stops from town to town along the coast. You might have seen her mean white pony car parked up in some vacant lot or on the margins of a strip mall's crowded blacktop, windowed down, her gleaming elbow cocked, handing out notes of currency with the name we call her by now and the name of our state and a whole lot of zeros on them. She says she has millions and millions more. She says she'll come again, and when she does, you can cash the notes for precious metals, end times loot. And if you didn't believe her already, all you had to do was look and see yourself reflected in the gold electroplating of her arm, the metal casing engraved with intricate waveforms and scenes and foliate scrollwork like an old-time quick-draw pistol. There you are, in the glow of summer eternal, and you might have been a loser all your life, been fucked on and ignored, but slip that bill in your pocket and swear your oath, because you're a West Floridian now, and everything's gonna be different. But it wasn't always like this. Time was, she didn't have any money to give, with her name on it or not. Time was, she didn't have but one name that anybody alive called her, didn't have but one arm, didn't have too long to live, it seemed. A time called 2013, in a place they still called Florida. While the battle raged downstairs, Destiny Woolsack zipped the collar of the biker jacket and fastened it across her throat with a strap of leather and a brass button that went pop. 18 years old and crouched between sloping roof beams and the keepsake bins and the garbage bags of her mother's exes things. Screams like storm surge rising from the rooms below, motes of fiberglass insulation trembling in the light of a lone bulb, a glittery pink haze on the heat-choked air. She breathed as deep as she could and took a racing helmet from one of the bags and made her way across the joists to the door of the attic loft where she'd been hiding since the Florida Wars began, about 5 minutes back. You could go further off into history if you wanted, and find a lot of other battles that predated this one, a lot of killings and hostile encounters. Or you could look ahead and see more glaring recent incidents, which we'll get to in good time. But for my money, for my family, this is where it all starts. She listened at the door in the attic floor, howls and babbling from downstairs, crashing glass, something hard being slammed into something soft, over and over again. With her right and only arm, she pulled the busted racing helmet on, a black Arai detailed in cherry red, its visor all scratched up from some old vintage wreck. Like the jacket, like the boots, like the gloves she'd pulled on with her teeth, the helmet had belonged to her mom's ex-boyfriend, Deke, and the foam against her face stank of beer sweat and the turn of the millennium. But it was better armor than nothing. She told herself she was a trooper, set to leap out of the belly of a plane, because this was a battle, not like what they'd say later on, before the truth came out. For most people, for the longest time, what happened in her house was just some bloodbath home invasion off the 12th hole fairway of a Jerry Pate signature course, the Gulf Breeze Massacre. And there's some who still believe that mess, who even now will lay the blame squarely on the shoulders of this girl right here, the one in the helmet and the jacket, about to lower the attic door into hell on earth. She'd been up there rifling through the bags of Deke's stuff, looking for things she might sell to finance the life she'd never have now. She'd already gone through her mom's shit in the bedroom closet below, took some money and pills, and her next stop was the bins where her step-grandma Krista kept the memorabilia from her brief career as a Miss Hawaiian Tropic Pensacola Beach and a straight-to-video actress. sashes and magazines, and a black satin Scream Queen's jacket. Then the plan had been to move on to her long-dead pawpaw stuff in the master bedroom across the landing, get a couple high-ticket items stashed, while the rest of the family was downstairs smoking, watching TV, reading their phones. Once they'd all passed out or gone to bed, she'd slip down and get her keys and some credit cards and leave their sorry asses forever. Then came the shouts and the screams, and before she could think, before she could do anything else, she'd pulled the door shut and crouched there, listening to her people die. Her mom and Krista, the boys Keenan and Rodney, like she'd wished it on them. At first she could tell their voices apart as each one sang out horribly in alarm or confusion, like they could stop it by shouting, "Hey, no, wait!" when this still seemed like a robbery before the killing began. Then their voices braided, melted, became as confused as her own genealogy and life here with her mom, Alexis, and Krista, who was technically her step-grandmother, even though Krista was basically the same age as her mom, and Krista's sons, who were technically her uncles, if they were even still alive anymore. She'd been all set to go, too, on the verge of freedom. That's partly why they first blamed her, because Destiny had some shit-ass friends who afterwards would tell the reporters that she'd been talking a lot lately about being gone, being free, and how she'd always been, let's say, intense, so you had to take her at her word. Now, they didn't want you to get the wrong idea, these rising seniors, and they recalled moments such as Destiny on the Quiet Water Beach boardwalk their sophomore year, climbing up into the blush-colored scallop bandshell and belting out an honestly heartbreaking rendition of the reprise of Part of Your World. Tears were seen in eyes from there to Hooters. She just hadn't been the same since the accident, they said. She'd always said she was leaving first chance she got, but once she lost her arm, it went from teenage venom to solemn vow that she was done with those motherfuckers, her family. And since among the 3 cranked-up killers who busted in on them was her half-aunt Tara, Pawpaw's own eldest daughter from his first marriage, and because another of them was Nessa Pace, ex-girlfriend and mother of the child of her technical Uncle Keenan, and because Nessa was a former classmate of Destiny's at DeLuna High, people were inclined to believe she was in on the whole thing, maybe left the door unlocked, a plan gone horribly wrong. Never mind she hadn't so much as met her half-aunt Tara, only knew her as somebody her mom would admit in sad, introspective moments to having fucked over pretty badly long ago. Never mind that she and her technical Uncle Keenan's ex-girlfriend, Nessa Pace, had been sworn enemies at school. When you come down to it, people want to believe what makes them feel better, and nothing makes people feel better than the idea that the victims of violence are somehow the authors of their own misfortune. The other reason folks got the idea Destiny might have been somehow involved, or at best ran off and left her family to their fate, was because when the night was over and the bodies were accounted, hers wasn't among them. The fucked up thing was, she could have left them there. Could have busted the attic window and crawled onto the roof and slid down the jasmine trellis, risked maybe a broken wrist or ankle, and ran off into the night. Who could blame her? If you went by the stats on the back of her blister pack, she shouldn't have stood a chance. She was on the short side, and spread around her in this house were 3 deranged intruders armed with guns, knives, and other instruments of death. Her bio might say she was born in Baton Rouge in 1995, might say she lost her left arm a little over a year ago in an accident caused by her mom, who was trying to chase down a hit-and-run driver on Highway 98 in Deke's truck. Might say Deke's dead body wrapped around a guardrail below a Ron John surf shop sign was the first corpse she ever saw, though it wouldn't be the last. Rank? Fuck-up first and only daughter. Pseudo-sister to her uncles, aged 15 and 13. Currently attending Florida Virtual School, a 5th-year senior, but not for lack of smarts. The little grid row indicating that particular stat would be about halfway full. Strength? Some. Speed? Medium. Firepower? None at the moment. In terms of toughness, though, she'd spent the summer punching hot cinders in the backyard Weber. And when it came to courage, well, on that night, those little rectangular motherfuckers would be full and blazing red all the way to the end of the row. So she lowered the spring-loaded door and stepped down the rungs onto the soft white pile carpet of her mom's bedroom in 2 big ankle boots and stood there for a moment, trying not to hear what was happening downstairs or the quaking bed frame and the barking grunts coming from the master bedroom across the landing, not 30 feet away. Because courage and toughness don't mean much when you're outnumbered and outgunned. What she needed now were weapons, and she knew just where to look. Under the bed in the master bedroom, where something terrible was happening, tucked inside a Dillard shoebox, was a pair of Crown Royal bags. One held a big black Colt police revolver, and the other a fistful of fat brass .38 special cartridges. She knew this because her whole life she'd been going in there and drawing that pistol for fun and comfort. Dim afternoons with the blinds drawn, hefting its weight, trying to learn the action, to perfect the border shift or the curly bill spin. Pawpaw had called the gun his Dirty Harry, though it had come from the days of the Depression, really, and an uncle of his who'd been a sheriff's deputy before he got sent to prison on some bullshit dug up by a Times-Picayune reporter. Years later, faced with his own prison term for conspiracy and fraud and money laundering, Pawpaw had made his third wife, Krista, promise to keep the Colt safe and cleaned and oiled. And she had, through the 14 months he spent at Softly Field, just down the road in Pensacola, and in the years following his escape and flight and capture and resentencing, when he was sent off to Three Rivers Correctional out in Del Rio, Texas, the very same federal facility that the sons of bitches had sent his uncle to back in the 70s. She thought of the revolver. Between her hand and its franzite grip was an open loft on the landing, a game room with a pool table and a hoop on the wall for foam basketballs, and beside that her Pawpaw's Big Chief quarter payout slot machine, a gift back in the day from some New Orleans gangster's son, he'd told her once. Pawpaw told her a lot of things. About herself, about West Florida, which was just some history shit before he'd gotten a hold of it. He'd taken a footnote and turned it into a real place and state of mind for listeners across the Gulf Coast. They'd tuned in to his radio show, self-professed patriots who couldn't believe in their country anymore, so he gave them a land they could believe in, a country inside the country that had always been theirs, always would be, a place they could reclaim, remake into somewhere the government couldn't run up and Ruby Ridge you. By the time his audience peaked in the mid-90s, he was selling West Florida on shares, bought land and built a mansion, and the beginning of what was supposed to be some kind of anti-government settlement out in Garcon Point, across the bay from Gulf Breeze, before the feds caught up to him. Pawpaw told her about that property and the mansion and everything that should have been theirs. He told her what he'd planned for West Florida, what could have been. And while the boys played with other inmates' kids in the outside area, and their mothers sat spreading cream cheese on vending machine bagels, he and Destiny drew maps and plans of that would-be state on coarse brown visiting room napkins. He marveled at this girl, her steeliness and command, how easily bossing came to her. Pretty soon she was telling him where things should go and how they ought to be. That's when he started calling her the governor. What he thought, deep down, he could have been, if everything hadn't gone sideways. He was the first to call her by that name, and for many years no one else would. He told her she was bound for greatness, as if her given name wasn't enough. He told her about the double-action trigger of the Colt, the way it hesitated at the end of the stroke. He told her men weren't worth a shit when you came down to it, so never trust one with your heart. But she knew that already. What he didn't tell her, whenever they'd visit him out in Del Rio, her mom or step-grandma Krista filled in on the way. her jacked-up lineage rolling by like roadside attractions while she stretched unbelted in the back seat and sipped on a blue raspberry slush puppy. The last thing Papa told her was, okay, he didn't have to call her the governor anymore if that was what she wanted. Destiny was 12, and what she wanted was to be done with pretend. Papa sat across from her with wet eyes, forcing a smile, and not long after, he was dead. They drove out to Texas to retrieve a jar full of ashes on their last big family prison road trip. They poured him out at various crucial points along I-10 on their way home, while Destiny sat in the back seething, trying to hide her guilt with rage. She hadn't thought of herself as the governor in years. She wasn't destined for a damn thing, except an awful death, it looked like. She'd become a fuckhead kid who'd spit in the face of the only person who'd ever really believed in her, and had planned that night to steal his Colt revolver and sell it too. Destiny didn't want to be that kid, any more than she wanted to be dead. So she became who she was always meant to be. Looking out the scarred and road-burnt visor of the racing helmet, she saw everything through a crimson mist, the atmosphere of a planet with gunpowder sands and blood-red skies lit by a sun called Hell. She went across the room to her mom's dresser and opened the sock drawer and filtered through a sea of balled-up no-shows until she finally found a pair that were calf-length. She shook one sock loose, slipped it in her jacket pocket, and went out into the game room. Screams tore up the stairwell's throat. She crossed the landing and came to the pool table and ran her hand along the scuffed baize rail and reached into the side pocket and palmed up a billiard ball and slipped it into her jacket. She squatted beneath the basketball hoop in the chrome-plated shadow of the slot machine, the big chief's brass head the size of a trailer hitch watching over her while she worked the ball into the mouth of the sock. This accomplished, she stood and took the sock by its neck and swung it once in a circle so the ball settled in the toe, and she headed for the master bedroom. When they'd been younger, right here, she'd seen Rodney go up for a dunk on his big brother Keenan, who upended him and smashed Rodney's foot against the big chief's head so that Rodney fell and lay there clutching his leg, sobbing in pain. The same kinds of sounds she heard now coming from the other side of the door, only worse. She towed the door aside and stepped into the room, whipping the billiard ball hip-high. Outside, in the shallows of the Santa Rosa Sound, bull sharks swam inshore to breed the next relentless generation there in razored sands. The man in the bedroom was enormous and naked to the waist, a lineman's bulk inked with snaking nooses and black-letter maxims. He had his back to her, and his mind on the awful shit he was doing to Rodney on the bed with the boning knife in his hand, so he didn't turn at her approach. Then it was too late, and his mind was on what the hell had just happened, and why couldn't he see too good, and what was this half-inch deep crater doing in his skull? She swung again, blood spray on the valance. Rodney, to her shock, alive and crawling away to the bathroom, where he locked himself in and slumped against the door and passed out. Now the dent-skulled man caught himself in the window frame and came slashing at her with his knife. She backed up, and the blade glanced off her helmet, and the man kept coming, cut a 6-inch gash in the black leather of the biker jacket. When he came at her again, she was ready, and the ball shattered his elbow. He bent double, still holding the knife, and let off a cry that reminded her of a kid she used to babysit, how he'd wail when he didn't get what he wanted, and she raised her makeshift flail again, windmilling, so that the man's eyes couldn't help but follow the ball until the fatal moment when it crushed his temple. And she brought the ball back around, and his mind was all over everything. The sock hung sopping, heavy at her side. She squeezed it, and hearing the dying man's glutch and groan, she went to where he'd fallen, curled, trying to protect what was left of his head. She squatted over him and hit him again and again. Her swings went wild, busted the drywall, cracked the baseboard. When the man was quiet and she finally let her weapon go, it landed with a wet thud on the rug, For a moment she stood with her fist clenched, awaiting the sound of footsteps on the stairs, and when none came, she went quickly to the bathroom door and pressed her hand to the stile. Told the boy on the other side it was going to be over soon. She was here now, and she'd be back. Her words muffled by the helmet, half true. Things like this are never over, and the bull sharks bred in the waters of the Sound that night would grow and mate and bear live young themselves before she saw him again. She knelt beside the mattress and lifted the bedskirt and dug beneath the frame until her fingers found the Dillard's shoebox. She pulled the box out and lifted the silver lid, parted the tissue paper, revealing the gold and purple glory of the whiskey bags. Tears welling, she spread one bag's puckered mouth wide and let the .38 slide into her lap. She took the pistol up and tested it in her gloved grip, her finger bulky in the trigger guard. The governor thumbed the cylinder release and opened the bag of cartridges and loaded 6 and snapped the cylinder back, and before she headed downstairs she looped her thumb in the golden drawstring and cinched the bag of ammunition and pocketed it as she rose, magnificent, with the Colt in her hand. Chapter 1. Call me Murder Baby. Welcome to West Florida. Population, my family and me, and about 1.5 million other people, more or less. I guess we're what you'd call the first family of the state, the Woolsacks, unless you call us criminals or enemies or crazy-ass coast trash on a spree. The governor says that here we're free to be our true bad selves, and that's what West Florida means to her. Then again, Leona O., who owns my heart forever, says I'm all the state she'll ever need, says I'm enough to fight for wherever we are. That's the thing about West Florida. You might say it's the 10 counties and a little under 200 miles of crystal sand and marsh and pine land that stretch from the Rio Perdido to Apalachicola. Or you could say it's just a dream. You could say it's everything from the Mississippi north of New Orleans and on under the 31st parallel to down around the Big Bend. Or you could say if there ever was a real West Florida, it's long dead now. You could call it a bastion of liberty, the last free place like Troy Yarborough's people do, when what they really mean is a Jesus-riddled white ethno-state with a beachside pastel tinge. You could say it's the unending glory of an awesome summer in which all our people have the right to be who and what they are, like the governor says. You could say anything, including you've never heard of it till now. Nothing wrong with that. Me? I'm at the heart of this whole thing, and I was almost 13 years old before I heard of West Florida, and I'd been living here my whole entire life. If you'd asked me back then, I would have said I lived in the Beau Rivage subdivision in Mandeville, Louisiana, with my Aunt Amber until she died, and her husband, Big Mike, and their twin boys, Dakota James and Dakota Blake, named for the state where Big Mike made his money in the Bakken boom before he and Amber got into the payday loan business. And if you'd asked them, they would have said I was the murder baby. My mom, Nessa Pace, was Amber's sister, and so she'd taken me in after I was found as a 6-month infant heat-stroking in the back seat of a car parked behind the house where the quote-unquote Gulf Breeze massacre had taken place. My mom's car, to be exact. By the time Amber had collected me and brought me to live with them, Big Mike and his boys had already saddled me with the name. Amber and Big Mike didn't believe in keeping things from kids, no matter how little you were. They took great pride in telling it how it was, admired those who claimed to do the same, wore shirts explaining in list form their lack of filter, fucks given, and other traits. And according to them, when it came to me, the way it was this. My mom and Amber had grown up in Pensacola, even though their roots were here in Louisiana, which Amber had the good sense to go back to as soon as she could. And she'd been genuinely happy for her little sister when she heard that Nessa was all eaten up with this boy named Keenan Woolsack, whose family, wouldn't you know it, also had roots in Louisiana. Only their roots were all gnarled up and contaminated from leach water, and probably ran through gas lines, and even though they had money, his family were themselves the kind of reckless fuckheads who'd dig in their yard without calling the utility company and blow up a neighbor's house or two on accident. A family of single moms and future single moms and boys who'd turned perfectly good girls into single moms. Which is exactly what happened to my mom, according to Amber and Big Mike, and when it did, this Keenan not only dumped her, not only denied everything for months, but he wouldn't even face her when she showed up, bump and all, at their door. Instead, his mom, Krista, and her stepdaughter, Alexis, and her daughter, Destiny, all got in my now single mom's face and said if they ever caught her on their property again, they'd, well, do some criminal-ass shit. Had the nerve, when Nessa didn't budge, to start in about the boy Keenan being too young for her, how she'd taken advantage of him, which Amber always said was a bullshit excuse, and I guessed it was. But later, when I did the math, I saw he would have been heading into 9th grade that year, and she a junior in high school. Regardless, my mom dropped out and had me, and Keenan would never make it to sophomore year. My mom ended up in Louisiana, where Amber and Big Mike could keep tabs on her, help her with bills and baby stuff, but she grew desperate and also addicted to drugs. Big Mike called it the despair that was killing white people, a phrase he'd heard some pundit say, which he went on repeating and applying to subsequent tragic deaths, including that of poor Aunt Amber, who went down as a result of fent. The massacre happened because Nessa, my mom, kept scrolling through Facebook or Instagram and seeing these posts of Krista and Alexis, the ones who threatened her, denied her child, talking about how blessed they were and looking like the queens of summer. She shouldn't have been doing it, Amber said, but my mom wouldn't quit stalking the Woolsack women online, and the Woolsack women wouldn't stop posting themselves sunning beside their pool or leaning against new cars. And my mom, she started screenshotting the posts and sharing them, talking about how bad they'd treated her. And then one of those things happened, the kind that get people fucked up and believing in fate. One of Nessa's posts got shared outside her circle, liked for its fury against bitches who cover for their punk-ass sons, bitches who don't deserve what they got, and if there's any justice in this world, should get what they deserve. And the post was liked and shared until it ended up in the hands of one Tara Woolsack, whose half-sister Alexis had left her to do 6 years in Elaine Hunt Correctional for attempted murdering this guy they were going to rob back in the day. 6 years, while Alexis walked free and went off to live with her dad's third wife on the motherfucking beach. DMs were sent, meetings held, meth smoked, weaponry arranged. A pistol-grip pump shotgun and a pair of Glock 15s with auto switches and a set of metal knuckles with these long, sharp wolverine claws that Tara kept behind the counter at the vape shop where she worked. At first, it was just something to make themselves feel better, Nessa and Tara and Blake, the guy Tara had attempted to murder, who she'd later married because life and love are strange, talking big about what they'd do. And then it became a plan. And the plan was to get in there and steal some shit, including cash and a big old sheaf of bonds Papa had supposedly stashed before he went inside. That's what Nessa told Amber before she left. They weren't going in there to kill anybody. Maybe terrorize the shit out of them, she said, but not kill. She'd confessed the whole thing to Amber in a single raging burst one night when I was 6 months old and wouldn't sleep for nothing. Gave her a whole speech with me squalling in her arms. Amber told me later she tried to get her little sister to at least leave me there with her where I'd be safe. Said when she asked my mom to do that, Nessa had glared at her with all the hatred in the world. "Safe?" she said, getting right up in Amber's face. "You saying my baby isn't safe with me? Like I'm what, dangerous? Well, I'm a great fucking mom because I'm dangerous. Nothing's ever getting between me and my baby, understand me? And pretty soon, me and him, we're gonna get everything we're owed." Amber didn't say anything back, just watched her sister go. By dawn, Nessa had me in my little toteable car seat on the road trip to the massacre. I don't know what she was thinking, what kind of future she envisioned. Maybe she saw herself as some baby cart assassin.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?